up, brother, gonna rise with the sun. Step 2, get some good, some food in you. Step 3, think real hard about what you wanna be. Step 4, everybody just do your thing.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 Yeah. Set your affirmations, aspirations. I got shit to do, the aftermath of preparation. Good food, good mood, blood in circulation. One step at a time, yeah, that's how you make it. Set a goal you control and the steps you take them. I try to pick one thought, have some concentration. And if I make a mistake, it's called education. I try to do this every day, call it replication. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 Wake up.
Hello, good morning, and well, actually, I don't know where you're joining in from, but good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining in from. Yesterday, we had an incredible day at the Authentic Lawyers Summit, so I want to welcome you to this incredible event. We've had people joining in from across the globe, right? We've had people joining in from New Zealand, Hong Kong. We had people joining in from all over Asia. We had people from, I think we had people from Nigeria, from Egypt. We had people from all across Europe. We had someone from Germany, from England. We had so many incredible people joining us from across the globe in the legal profession. Thank you. Come on in. Really excited to see. I'd love to see in the chat. So go ahead in the comment, leave us a comment. Where are you joining in from today? We'd love to see just, everyone who's here. Would love to, acknowledge you and thank you for joining us. I'm the Whole Tank. I'm one of the co-hosts of this event. I'm joined by Aaron. Hey, Aaron, how you doing today? Where are you joining in from?
I'm in Toronto. I know you're in Dallas, and we've been doing everything remotely the last 2 years. I've not done any of this in person. The power of the internet these days.
We got Vivian joining in from Canada. We're having just, dozens of people. Saskatchewan. Hey, Courtney, good to see you again. Just some incredible people. I wanted to take a couple of moments to recap what we talked about yesterday. We had some people, South Africa. Hey, look at that. Yesterday, we had people from all across the globe, but we talked about some very personal topics. We talked about the real issues with mental health, the real issues with the role of women in the legal profession. And, if you had a chance to listen to it, I think you would say that the stories were incredibly personal, and they all speak to a systemic change that's needed in this profession. There are so many things hiding under layers and layers of bureaucracy, layers and layers of people just hushing things down, pushing things down. And one of the comments that kept coming to us yesterday was that, I'm so glad you brought this up in the open. Like Marian Zaki's talk, just people were like, this is amazing. Angela Hand, this is amazing. We had Gavin talk about his experience with depression and, where he almost killed himself, unfortunately, and his path to recovery. And from the outside in, super ultra successful, Harvard Law, big law experience, making a ton of money, but internally quite depressed, quite broken. And it was extremely cathartic for a lot of people. And I think today our goal is to keep that energy going and bring up the stuff that's been hiding under layers and layers of, all these bureaucracy, cultural norms, etc., and bring it up to the forefront. Before we do that, I think it's worthwhile, Jennifer from Ottawa, hey, good to see you. Sarah, good to see you. Selena, hey, good to see you again. Latanya, great. So many incredible people. Before we get into it, I think it's worthwhile to shake off whatever energy we have. Maybe the coffee still isn't kicked in. And I'm going to turn it over to Aaron to get our energy pumping again.
Awesome. So before I do that, I've got a question. You can let us know in the chat. Scale of 1 to 10. 10 is terrible. 1 is not so bad. How much do you hate daylight savings time? Lots of us parents here. Give me a 10 is just awful. 1 is, yeah, it's not bad at all. I'm guessing we're going to have some strong opinions here, I suspect, if anyone here is a parent, especially a parent of young kids, not to mention in general. Let us know in the comments what you think about daylight savings time, especially after this past weekend. Yeah, a 10, pretty much universal 10s going on here. Daylight savings is the worst. I thought it was bad before I had a kid. Now as a 5-month-old, wow, this is an even dumber concept. Let's hope we abolish that shortly. All right, so let me share my screen quickly here. Courtney, you are lucky in Saskatchewan. You're ahead of the curve here. All right, so what I want you to do quickly, just to before we get going with Farron's chat, is head over to menti.com. You can do this on your smartphone, you can do this on your computer, whatever works, and just type in the code 14957819. So just head over there, menti.com, and enter in that code 14957819. Dowell's 14 steps ahead of me. He's already got it up on the screen there as well. Here's my question for you. If you joined us yesterday, we used this one too. How are you actually feeling today? It's all anonymous. We're not going to know who said what. So let us know, like, how is today going? And lots of us are parents here, or maybe parents to be. So it's okay if you want to say I've had better days. All right, answers are already popping in. Lots of people really quick here. I know lots of people are going to be watching this on different platforms. The recording is later, but let's just get a quick pulse check of how we're doing in the room here. All right, is it the weekend yet? So we got about a mixed bag. Lots of people, pretty good space, pretty good. Things are great. Good group over here. So I hope that you'll leave today in a better mood than you joined us in. Hopefully inspired at least to some extent, but also maybe like Dowell mentioned, some moments of catharsis, or just feeling heard or seen, or all that other kind of good stuff. All right. If you joined us before, we're going to start each day with a couple quick brain teasers just to get the juices going. Dowell, they're just as hard as yesterday. It was a tough day for you. I cheated because I looked them all up in advance. So here's what I want you to do. Submit your guess on Menti. Here is the first one. What goes, this one's really hard. What goes here? What's the next letter?
My techie brain tells me that DRM stands for Digital Rights Management, and well, that's all I know about what this is.
Take another 10 or 15 seconds. See if you can figure this one out. It is not easy. I would 100% not have gotten this one had I not looked up the answer. If you know the answer or you want to take a guess, you can guess over here. No one's been brave enough yet to submit it. It's anonymous at least, which is good. And sometimes kids are better at these things. And I think it's sort of fitting as we're talking about parenting here, because they just don't think as linearly sometimes as we do as adults. All right, we've got one taker here. Unfortunately, not a quite right one. D. Whoever guessed D is correct. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. E for do. Geez, that was not fair. All right, let's try this one here. Which tire doesn't move when a car turns right? We got to think like a child here. We got to get our parenting brains off and our kids' brains on. And let me move this one over here so you can submit your answers there. Which tire does not move when a car turns right? There's one of them that doesn't move, apparently. Lawyer brains off, kid brains on, if we can figure this one out. I got one person who submitted a guess yet. Anyone else want to take a shot here? 2 are in. Give you another 5 seconds here to see if we can figure this one out. Yeah, someone threw it in the chat. Correct. The spare tire. Yep. Spare tire doesn't move. Again, the adult brain, not great at this. We're like, they all move. What are you talking about? All right, let's do one more here. A little bit easier, but still not easy. What message is sort of hidden here? There's like a, I call it a little hidden message. What is the phrase or thing going on here?
Oh, I get this one.
All right, Dowell's got it. Let's see if anyone else is. Maybe we've got a success here for some of you here. These are not easy. No answers in yet here.
I'm gonna say it's something to do with like trying to stand still.
We're getting closer. Getting closer. All right, we've got one in. Nadia's got it in the chat. Yeah, try to understand, and someone's got it here too. Try to is understand.
Oh man.
It's
Okay.
better at these. These are not obvious at all because they're super non-intuitive. But anyways, hopefully that got some of the juices, the brains awake at least now. And let's get going with some amazing speakers we have lined up today. The first one of the day is Farron Bogash, and Farron is a construction lawyer. She started her own firm recently, took that really daring step of doing that in 2022. She's the founder of a tech company. She is the vice chair of 2 not-for-profits that provide affordable housing. She posts about her experiences all the time on LinkedIn. She's got several kids. I don't know how she does any of these things, let alone all of them. And she's also an alumni of Build Your Book, which is the program Dal and I ran. And it's been so inspiring and amazing watching her journey, speaking out, and just seeing all her success over the last little bit. So, Farron, I'm done talking. Take it away from here.
Thanks, guys. So thanks, everyone. This is really exciting. So as of yesterday, I had like a lot of random notes for this presentation, but I didn't have it tied together. And I was going to go into the office, which I do once a week. So I thought like I will come up with that tie to thread sort of all my notes together on my dreaded commute. But what I didn't plan for is my 5-year-old to wake up on the wrong side of the bed. And to be honest, that's putting it mildly. He screamed at me most of the way to school. Apparently, I had been unfair by insisting he get dressed, brush his teeth, and the horror, put on his shoes. Now, on top of that, he told me I was excellent at buying him the worst hats ever. He refused to wear a hat and gloves. It was tough. So due to dealing with my 5-year-old's hardships, we were now late to drop off his studious 7-year-old brother. The grade 2 teacher is tough on tardiness, so I had to prepare my 7-year-old for dealing with being late when it wasn't his fault. Okay, we do it. We get to the kindergarten gate for drop off. I'm late, but it's fine. It's going to be fine. Not quite. The 5-year-old then decides he's not going to go to school. Instead, he wants to spend the day with me, his dictator mother. His teacher had to pry him off of me as he clung on for dear life. It wasn't even 9 a.m. I run quickly out of that place. I'm sure he'll climb the gate and find me, but I get to the bus stop and I check my phone. Opposing counsel has already emailed me again to set up an urgent call. My inbox is on fire. I don't know how one person, and I know a lot of you are like this, gets so many emails in a single day. Plus, then all my Outlook reminders start popping up for all my meetings. The group chat from school are exploding. The teachers need more volunteers. And don't forget the money for lunch. And when is that homework assignment due? And what is that homework assignment? So, what is this so-called work-life balance? Because frankly, nothing in my life is balanced. My kids are 7, 5, and 1.5. I left Big Law in January 2022 when I had a 10-month-old and started my own firm. But I'm going to take you back to my journey to when I had kids. And feel free if you have questions in the chat, like I'm happy to answer them or try. When I was a 5th-year associate. So my husband and I decided we were ready to add kids to the mix, but it just didn't work as planned. I didn't get pregnant, and after a few months, we hit the year mark. I started fertility assessments and treatments for unexplained infertility. What does that mean? It means going to a doctor's office very early every morning for months to be poked and prodded, lined up with a group of other women. I would get there so early so that I could still be at my desk at my normal time, which before kids was 8 o'clock. And so that no one would know that anything was up with me. I remember running during a break at a cross examination to go get inseminated, to head back to the office, to work late that night to prepare to file an injunction. Biology can't be booked in an Outlook calendar, and it was the beginning of me losing control over my life. It was a dark time. I was thriving at work, but I wasn't sure if I ever could have kids. I was really privileged to be able to afford treatments, but I couldn't afford the toll that it was taking on my mental health. I had to take a break from the treatments and from living this double life. And then, I got pregnant. You know that because I have 3 kids. But by this time, I'd been trying to get pregnant for 2 years. I had carefully watched wonderful female lawyers get pregnant, go on a mat leave or 2, and then leave private practice or leave the practice of law altogether. Now, sometimes it was about the hours they had to put in, and, sometimes it was that. But sometimes it was that they came back from a leave to nothing. No transition plan, no files, nothing, or and a sudden and unrealistic expectation to build a practice with minimal or no support. By this time I wasn't naive anymore. I knew that my years of long, long, long hours and commitment to the firm just wasn't enough, and I needed help. And I hired someone and I paid for it myself because I didn't want my firm to know, and we worked on a plan for what I wanted. Because I had no idea. Um, I had no idea to even create a plan. I just knew I didn't know what I was doing. So, I set out expectations. I asked to be copied on email, blind copied on email, so I'd be in the loop, but it was clear I would not be responding to emails. I offered to help junior lawyers if they were on files, if they had questions. I know some of them are listening today, and they'll tell you I stood by my word. I might have been wearing a baby and walking up and down the street, but I did answer their questions. But this was my plan at the time. It's what I wanted. Looking back, yeah, I would have done things really differently, but I mean, let's be honest. That's what happens when you do something new for the first time. The key for me was my plan. Now, some of the lawyers I worked with respected my wishes, but others didn't. Maybe because they assumed I didn't mean it, or maybe they were writing me off because I was going down that road of having kids. I don't know. I took a 6-month mat leave, and I know there are people from all over the world, and but in Canadian standards, that's short. So if you're American, I know you probably think that's an incredibly long leave, but here in Canada, we have up to 18 months leave. It was 12 with my first 2 kids, and then 18 months with my third. Um, and I'm a firm believer that we need to support lawyers in the type of leave that they want, and not sort of have a one size fits all policy. Short, long, extended, whatever the person wants, it's a personal choice, and those choices need to be respected. So during this short leave, I was passed over for partnership. Apparently, it was a rule change. I was the only one up for partnership that year. And it was awful to be asked if I had time for a quick call. And I assumed it was about, I think there had been a new hire and there wasn't an office, and they wanted to know if I'd share my office while I was off, which of course I wouldn't have minded. But no, I was asked. If I didn't mind being passed over for partnership. And I think that was one of the many days that I cried more than my infant. And it was hard. I fast forward 6 months. I came back to work. I had a baby who slept, some nights, and I came back with like a loud breast pump. My lovely assistant got large Post-it notes because we were in like glass bowls because lawyers needed to be, sometimes watched to see what to make sure they're working. But like no one wanted to see what I was doing, or I didn't think they did. So my assistant got these like big Post-it notes, and she kind of like layered them so you couldn't see into my office. And she got this like door stop for me to like shove under my door so it'd be like harder for someone to open my door. I also had a sign that said like, "Do not enter breastfeeding," but like people don't, like they just walk in, they're not paying attention. And I also said to HR, look, if you have a no locks policy and this is what I have to do, if anyone sees my boobs, it's on you. This is not me. And off I went. I felt a lot of guilt to continue breastfeeding my son, and I pumped a lot. And to be honest, it was terrible. Um, uh, I did it in the back of a cab, in a bathroom, during just a break at Discoveries, like you name it, I did it. I see that someone says they're having issues hearing. I'm assuming Erin or Doll will tell me if there's a problem. It was part of my own unrealistic expectations of myself to work my ass off to prove myself when I came back. The same person that had worked at that firm for 5 years, I felt I had to prove myself that I was the same Farron that had left 6 months ago. I was the same, but I wasn't. I was tired, and I had a baby, and there was something in my life that I couldn't just drop for work, and it was my kid. And it was my kid that made me see life in a different way. And I don't think people need parenting or kids to do this. I think a lot of people have this, but this is kind of that moment for me. And it changed me, and it continues to change and challenge me every day. But let's go back. I'm at work with a 6-month-old. My husband took 3 months off to be with our kid, and he had to find and arrange for childcare. We hired a nanny. It helped to ease my transition back to work. He made more money than me, but we agreed to sacrifice, and he was also in like a client service industry. I remember we went out for like a dinner with his team, and we were at this fancy restaurant, and one of his colleagues said, like, I know David took a leave, but I also took a parental leave. And my very nice husband, so much nicer than me, so polite, so nice, told him in a not so nice way that taking 2 weeks when your kid is born is not a parental leave. I mean, my husband got it. Him taking a leave was a lifesaver, a career saver, and a marriage saver. I knew this from the first time that he took our kid in like the bouncy chair into the bathroom and took a shower without being like, here, take the baby. I need to take a shower. He got it. I was doing something. I don't know if I was working or watching TV, whatever it was. He knew it was his time, and the kid bounced in the chair and he took a quick shower. My husband isn't babysitting the kids, he's parenting. He doesn't need a long list of instructions when I'm working late. Sure, we ride or die together with our calendar invites, but like we're in it together and we can swap out if we need to. I know some lawyers who can't leave their spouse to put their kids to bed or can't do it without it being a huge deal. And putting 3 kids to bed is like hard. It's harder than the toughest motion you can argue. It is like a challenge, and um, it's just like I don't know why. Like it's the same thing every day. Put on your pajamas, brush your teeth, or I'll brush your teeth. Go to the bathroom. Why do I have to go to the bathroom? Don't want you to pee in the bed. I don't think you want it. Let's read a story. I don't know. It just takes. It's like this total marathon. Um, but it is. So like it is hard, but I need to be able to not do it some nights. And when I'm like in a trial or in discoveries or I'm at a networking event, like I need to be present at what I'm doing. And I cannot be worrying about that I didn't tell my husband to, do X, Y, or Z with our kids. I know they're taken care of, and I'll see them in the morning. Or sometimes I'll see them next week if I'm in discoveries or a trial because I leave before they wake up. But when I returned to work, I mean, I felt so much pressure to deliver. Um, but I didn't bounce back. Like, it's not so easy. I slumped along. The transition was so hard. I went from barely speaking to an adult for 6 months to uh, a motion record on my desk. It was like, welcome back. We have a motion record. You have to write a factum this week. And I was like, yes, I have work. And then I sat down on my computer and I was like, how do I write a factum? Oh my gosh, I have to research this and I have to write it. And it was like so hard to get my brain back into work. It was hard. But looking back, it gave me like the break from work didn't teach me about how to balance your life and suddenly I could multitask and do it all amazing, like no, but it gave me perspective. And I had taken a break from practicing law and I could kind of see my practice and my clients and what I was doing with a bit of perspective because I could I had taken that break and I had that moment, and I actually found that I was better at service and better at the work when by having that sort of pause and like ability to let your brain do other things, even if it's like singing horrible baby songs all day and going to music classes, which wasn't my deal. But anyway, 6 months later, I get pregnant with our strong-willed now 5-year-old. Okay, the one who started this whole story, and I was put up for partnership at the firm. And I'm like 8 months pregnant. I'm into like, I see people are saying putting kids to bed is really hard, and the husband took a leave, and like it's the best. Agree, Jennifer. Like it's awesome. So I'm about to be up for partnership. And then I'm like 8 months pregnant. I'm in discoveries at like one of the biggest cases that I had. I was like working crazy hours. I like constantly had like pink, like whatever my kids had. I was like always my older kid. I was always sick. And a male partner knocks on my office, someone I didn't work with, and tells me that I should withdraw my partnership application before the vote because I would become an underperforming partner. That other women partners were struggling to manage with kids, and it wasn't good for them, and it wasn't good for the firm. Flat out said it. Now, he wasn't a dinosaur. I know you're picturing like the dinosaur. He wasn't. He was a few years ahead. He had 2 small kids, and this was 2017. Now, like, I mean, this is the first time I've spoken about it publicly. It was like one of the most awful experiences of my career, and probably a subject for like a whole other talk. But like, this is what I faced having my second kid. I was killing like work. My hours were great, like all that stuff. And I'm still told because you have kids, you should withdraw your name. And I'm sure this person wasn't the only person who thought of that. I didn't. I didn't withdraw and I got voted in. And then I wake up and 7 days after I become partner, I'm a parent with 2 kids under 2. I had my son January 7th. And then I felt like I had to develop my own practice, spend time on business development, do all these things to prove myself again. I co-developed software to manage like legislation in Ontario without needing to call a lawyer. I took time out of my kids' weekends and evenings to do it because I thought it was important. I litigate complex cases, discoveries, motions, trials, like you name it, like I do it. And I felt, and to be honest with you all, I still feel pressure, not to just be like a mom who works, but like to prove I'm as good as everyone else. Like a court a couple weeks ago when the old white dude on the other side said, well, like Farron probably has some childcare obligations. Can you handle this schedule, Farron? Seriously? Or to justify to myself, I had been passed over for being invited to events or client pitches or other opportunities because I had a kid and was going to have more kids. But let's, you know, let's also talk about like home life and what that looks like. Like life is not, Instagram, and I mean, Instagram. Gosh, I don't mean like, do you know what Instagram is? I'm an elder millennial and showing like perfectly that right now. But like, those perfect moms on Instagram who are like always working out and making smoothies with their kids, and their kids have like the cutest outfits. Like that is not my life. Like I've really thought of creating like an Instagram account of like what my life looks like. My kitchen's a disaster. My kids are wearing mismatched like socks, never match. Never match. I don't know what happens, and they never match. Their clothes, like they pick like really creative outfits. Eating cookies for breakfast, like isn't that real? Because they don't want to eat anything else. And our third baby, our COVID baby, is like in charge of our household, and like Baby Shark is permanently playing, or this awful Cocomelon, like Cocomelon all day, like running through my head. Wash your hair, do. Like this is my life, right? There's cheese string wrappers everywhere, like everywhere. And I'm constantly like last night remembering that we need cash for the book fair, or arranging play dates for my kids. And like no parents send birthday evites to my husband. No one. He never gets them. They all come to my burning inbox. I remember I have to sign them up for camp, buy a new winter jacket, schedule parent teacher interviews. Like you get the drift. Like plus when my kids are sick, sad, angry, you name the emotion, they usually choose me first over their dad. Sometimes it's like very amazing and rewarding, but some days it's just draining. People don't talk about that. The dream of having excellent billings, lots of new clients, perfect hair, making sure my kids eat healthy food and don't have screen time, it's kind of bullshit. And I can't do it all. And I can't do it all the time. I do the best I can. But there's no balance. There just isn't. There is work that is part of life, and life is part of work. And quite often, there's chaos. And there's guilt. There's so much guilt. I'm not doing enough at work. I'm not doing enough at home. I don't know what I'm doing at work. I don't know what I'm doing at home raising kids. And I guess all I wanted to say today is like, you're not alone if this is your life. It's not really about how many balls you can juggle. It's about trying not to drop those crystal balls, those key balls that can break. And those balls are always changing. Sometimes I don't have to do something for my kids, but sometimes I absolutely have to drop everything. The same goes for my clients. I'm trying to be, thanks, Nadia. That's so nice. To be less distracted on my phone because I'm terrible at it. And I know it's bad. To take time on the weekends to do work. So Monday is less stressful and more manageable. I still feel guilty when I miss a school presentation, have to reschedule a work meeting, but I'm just trying to live with it and accept that this is the way it is. To accept life without this perfect equilibrium. To enjoy the highs of winning a decision. We won one last week. It was just amazing. That was like a real high. Or an outcome from a client, like amazing. Enjoy it. To join a board where I can learn new things. But also to watch my kids, like to watch my 7-year-olds complete a Sudoku, or my 5-year-old race around the hockey rink, or my 1.5-year-old charm anyone to do anything for her. I love that too. And I didn't want this talk to come off as negative, to take away the joy of being a lawyer and enjoying it some, all, most of the time, or enjoy having kids. But I spoke like this because I'm tired about people talking about it without talking about it, if that makes sense. I'm tired of hearing about balance and boundaries because my 5-year-old had no boundaries yesterday. And setting them just wouldn't have changed anything. And if a big client needs something done, it just needs to get done. I'm starting to see the impact of owning my own firm on my kids. Well, I mean, some of them. My 1-year-old thinks that there are people living in my computer that we can pull up anytime and she can talk to them. But my 7-year-old invited me to his class to tell them about my new venture. He explained that like like other people, his mom owned her own business. At that time, it had been 2 months. And she had her own employees. At that time, it had been 1. And she could do all of these things, which I thought was pretty awesome. These things, these wins, these highs at work, like the big win or the big court attendance or the client being happy or the kid, getting some award at school or being proud. Like that's what gives me the push to make it into the next day, because the next day is going to be some wild adventure. And you got to kind of enjoy the good, accept the uncomfortable, accept that there's going to be guilt, accept that you're going to drop some balls, and like just make it through the next day. And it's a pretty interesting, challenging life. Depends on the day you talk to me. But, you can do it, and it's real, and it's tough sometimes, but that's okay. So I have no idea how I did for time on this. But if anyone has any questions, or Aaron and Dalal, if there's anything anyone wants to add, I'm happy to chat
you
about
can
it.
take a
Or
read through
you
the
can,
comments later, Farron, just to see
okay.
how much your talk was resonating with people. And if anyone has any questions for Farron while she's here, feel free to throw them into the chat. But Farron, as always, thank you so much for being honest, being authentic, which I think you are incredible at doing. And like you said, and that's the reason we're doing this event, is to have more real, honest conversations. But what's going on? I'm a new dad on my end, and obviously there's complete gender differences here. But for me, it was like, wow, why did my wife all the time, like, why did no one say that this was a reality, or like, why do we not talk about these things? Infertility, like the numbers on infertility are nuts, and yet we pretend like it's like a rare thing. And it's not just the legal profession, obviously, but I think in the legal profession, whether it's for women, men, or anyone else, like if we're not talking about this more, we're all going to have these unrealistic expectations. And I love that refreshingness of every time I hear you talk, see you post on LinkedIn. It's always honest, and I always resonate so much with it. So Farron, thank you so much. Dalo, why don't you come join me here and we'll do a little activity. But thanks again, Farron.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. So yeah, that was incredible. The comments are coming in. It's incredible. One of the things that Farron does really well is that she talks about it, and just by the act of her talking about it, she's normalizing a lot of these things. And I think from all the comments coming in, Lindsay, yeah, Tara, like all of you guys are saying that. Thank you for sharing the story. It is refreshing. It is authentic. And one of the things we're trying to do in this summit is make it normal to talk about these things, to make it to make these systemic changes. We all have to step up and share our own stories, our own advice, our own struggles, our own kind of issues. And so I want to take the next couple of minutes challenging all of you to do a mini activity with us. I want you to go on LinkedIn if you feel comfortable, and if not, you can leave a comment in the chat here directly. And the chat comments will stay here. So if you want to take the seed here, post it on LinkedIn later on, you totally can. It's entirely up to you. And here is the challenge for you. What is one piece of advice that you would give to a future parent in the legal profession? And if you're not a parent, that's okay. Maybe it's someone you admire who gets this right. Maybe it's Farron's talk entirely. And I want you to go there and post it up on LinkedIn. It's a very small activity, but I think if enough of us leave that we drop that pebble in the lake, it creates those ripples that are going to last and are going to do just a small thing to change the cultural kind of narrative we have in this profession about parenting, being a mother, being a father, and being a legal professional. So I wanted to just turn this over to you. Go out there, do it. You can use the hashtag Authentic Lawyer Summit. Feel free to tag me and Aaron in it. This way, everyone here collectively can support you and your post. But really, if we're going to normalize all this stuff that you loved about Farron's talk, if we're going to normalize it, it's going to happen if we all chip in and we all start talking about this. So we're going to spend a couple of minutes doing this. If you want, you can leave a comment in the chat. That's totally fine. And we're going to pick it up with our next speaker in just 3 to 5 minutes, or 5-7 minutes. as we'll get started in just 2 or 3 more minutes.
Yeah, it's great to see some of the advice in the comments. I know many of you are busy writing a post or thinking about what to chime in on. Feel free to share a link to that post in the chat or tag us on LinkedIn. But I think, if there's one thing that really resonated, and I'm so excited for the upcoming talks, to do more of, is having these honest, open conversations about reality, right? When we all say, oh, today's going great, everything's good, and we don't talk about it, it leads others to believe that, oh, being a lawyer and a parent is super easy, which being a parent is not easy in the first place. Being a lawyer is not easy, or an attorney is not easy. And combining the two, certainly not easy there. So take another moment or two, and then we'll get over to our next speaker. And I'm really excited for the upcoming group of speakers that we've got today, building on what Farron is saying. And I think, again, our goal here is to talk about these things and be honest about them, because it's the only fair thing to do, and it's better for everybody. So take another moment or two, and we'll be right back with Dash shortly. All right, we may as well get started here with our next speaker. So, when we were putting together this summit and thinking about parenting, obviously our own biases come into play. And I'm a new dad myself. I've got a 5-month-old, our first kid, who was born in May. And it's one thing to be a woman lawyer and navigating some of the issues Farron talked about, and we're going to hear a lot more about that later. But I don't think we talk enough about what it's like as a man or a male lawyer to be, a lawyer and a dad, in part because things have just changed so much, societal expectations, generational expectations. And I certainly found I was not hearing enough conversations about what reality was like for people ahead of me. So we really wanted to make sure we balanced things out today and got perspectives from multiple different angles. And I'm so excited for this upcoming group of speakers. The next person who's going to talk is Paul Eric Veal, who goes by Dash. He's a partner at Lesner Slott, which is probably the top litigation boutique in Toronto. And his practice includes class actions, competition law, complex commercial disputes, and professional liability. He's also very into data and really doing things in a modern way. But he's also a lawyer. And if you follow him on Twitter, you know all about his late nights and roaming around the streets of Toronto trying to get a kid to sleep. Dash, over to you. Take it away from here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Aaron. So thanks so much for having me. I caught most of Farron's talk. I thought that was awesome. She nailed it. I think it'll be hard for me to add too much more of value, but I'll give it a go anyways. So first, let me just recognize this. Aaron's right. It is different being the dad, but it's different in a lot of really complex ways. Primarily, we benefit from a huge effing amount of privilege, right? And I'm sure there are other dads on this call who have had the experience of you're with your kid at the playground and you're within 5 or 10 feet of them on your phone, and everyone is fawning over what a great dad you are. We're obviously no one's doing that about moms, because we're still in this totally fucked up headspace of dads as a secondary parent, and that anything we do seems to be above and beyond, which is crazy, of course, and that's a privilege we benefit from. And so I just need to sort of recognize that starting out. The second sort of piece of privilege that I'd note about myself is that I do work at a firm that has a lot of supports. So some of the things I'm going to say, obviously, it's just a different environment when you're a solo. It's a different environment when you're running your own firm like Farron is. It's just a different context. So in some ways, I have it really darn easy. And so the things I'm going to say may not be broadly applicable for everyone in every circumstance, and I totally get that. So who am I? Why am I talking about this stuff? So I'm a lawyer, but more importantly, I've got 2 kids. So our older one was born August 2020, smack dab in the middle of the pandemic. So she's 26 months now. Our younger one was born just about 6 months ago at the beginning of May. So 2 kids in relatively quick succession. We had sort of a 4.5 month period of having the dreaded but also delightful 2 under 2. And other people are going to sort of talk about leaves or have talked about leaves. Other people are going to talk about sort of what it's like with older children. I guess what I wanted to talk a little bit about is the transition period when things are, I keep telling myself they're at their most crazy. I don't know if that's actually true that they're at their most crazy when the transition happens, but it certainly is a crazy time. So in our case, there's sort of a very distinct time that I remember that was the most bananas time that I've had in trying to balance things. So I took a 5-month leave with child number 1. Once child number 2 comes along, my plan was to do a sort of a similar thing, which is I took some period of vacation for a few weeks right when our second daughter was born. But then later on, after my wife goes back to work, I will then take a leave for a period of months at that point. And when our second daughter arrived, it was an adjustment. Anytime it is when a new kid shows up, and newborns are hard, as everyone knows, but it was manageable. We sort of figured out our systems to be in place. And part of the way that it was manageable is that we were lucky in some ways with our first child. So I'll say the thing that you're not supposed to say as a parent. And don't worry, we got our comeuppances on this. Our first child was, for the first roughly 2 years of her life, a really good sleeper. And she was one of those kids that as of like 6 or 7 months are in the crib at that time at 7:30, wide awake, and she would just fall asleep magically within 5 minutes. Like it was the dream that you didn't want to jinx. So that's going along, and that was part of the reason why when child number 2 came along, we're like, okay, this is difficult, but it's manageable. In August of this year, so our second child at this point is 3 months old, still very much in the newborn phase. But okay, we're managing that. We think we've got that sort of figured out. We then also, so we have a nanny at home because, well, partially we couldn't get into daycares around us, and partially we heard the horror stories of people of daycares being closed and sort of needing to take time off, and we're like, fuck it, we can afford it. We'll get the supports that we need for a nanny, and so we got a nanny. Okay, fine. Our nanny at the beginning of August, she's infinitely cooler than either my wife or I are, and she said, look, I've got this trip booked to go hike Machu Picchu for 3 weeks. Is it cool if I take 3 weeks off in August? And of course, our reaction was, cool, yes, go take your 3 weeks off in a row in August. That sounds awesome. We'll figure all of that out, and that's super cool. And it would have been super cool, except for the fact that sort of the moment that she left to go on her vacation, our older daughter, who was this model sleeper to that point, had a terrible sleep regression. So I'm talking like not napping during the day, figuring out how to climb out of her crib and then jumping onto her floor, bedtime at night happening, but it taking like 2.5 hours longer than it used to, and lots of tears, lots of yelling, lots of screaming, lots of hitting, all of those things in pure chaos. And And that was chaotic because, we had worked out systems that very much depended on, like, daughter number one is a good sleeper, and that means that we just have time to do particular things, whether those things are work related or non-work related. So we just had to sort of figure out how to manage that in those circumstances. And the one thing I'd say, and this goes with some of the comments I saw about not feeling guilty about being a parent, my reaction, and this again came from a massive position of privilege of being able to do it, I just sort of had to spontaneously start ignoring work for a few weeks. And I recognize how privileged that sounds, right? What that meant is that in a period where I had still planned to be doing some work, it was just not going to happen. And rather than try and really poorly do both of those things, I sort of had to sort of speak to colleagues to get them to cover things as much as I humanly could. And I initially felt bad about that, and I still have some lingering guilt about that. But I also realized that there was absolutely no way I was going to be able to do the things that I do and sort of actually provide the childcare that is my responsibility and that I should do, and that and have my partner not go completely insane, but also do a good job for my clients. It just wasn't all going to happen at the same time. And so this is sort of the punchline that I'm going to come to as much as possible. And again, easier in certain environments than others. I think the way to think about sort of all the challenges that come, it's not so much, as Farron said, it's not just this trite set boundaries, right? Because boundaries were not going to help at all in the scenario I was in. You can't set boundaries with a toddler who's having a sleep regression. You can't set boundaries with a client when all of a sudden, all of the times where you might have had to work, you just aren't able to do your work anymore because you've got that chaos. So boundaries are, they're a useful thing to think about, but they're an incomplete concept. So I like to think about it as having the systems in place as much as you possibly can to manage those things, right? So I, part of the strategy when I went on leave too was, a long time in advance of going on leave, I got other people, if I had a file that was just me previously, I made sure that there was no file that was just mine. I sort of identified people that I knew had capacity who could sort of step into the breach for a period of time to help manage those types of things. We talk about, there's that trite notion that it takes a village to raise a child. And we usually think about that in the context of, our social interactions, our peers, our family, and the actual child rearing parts. I think it's useful to also think about it taking a village to raise a child when it comes to your professional environment. I am lucky enough, and I think more and more of us are over the years, I'm lucky enough to have other colleagues who are new moms and new dads, and they get it. They get that there are times when you just can't do work at all. And those people are amazing in my experience for covering the times at times when it's just impossible for me to manage those kinds of things. And so the way that we got through weeks and weeks of a terrible sleep regression when I basically stopped doing any work at all unplanned was by me relying on my colleagues. Now, part of the way that I can rely on those colleagues is having the open and honest discussion with them in advance. Like I would say in general, pretty close, and knowing the challenges that we're each facing and that we're having, so that when one or another of us has those problems, other people can jump in to jump in, can fill the void, jump into the lurch. Again, that's not going to be a solution for everyone. That's obviously not a solution for solos. And I also get that it's tougher for moms to say that than it is for dads to say that, right? Like, I have the privilege that if I say fuck it, I can't deal with this thing right now. Hold on, I'm dealing with my child right now. No one would ever ask me if I'm committed to my career, right? Where that's a thing that obviously moms will get that question in a way that dads don't. But my hope is, and I'm seeing it at my firm, I hope that other people are seeing it at their firms, is as dads are more involved on average, and as dads are trying to figure these things out and balance in the same way, we're having more of those honest conversations at firms, and the more we have those honest conversations at our firms, the more likely it is that we can build up the systems to be able to cover us when we need coverage, because it is not going to be possible to do our jobs 100% of the time, especially during sort of peak chaos periods. So again, that's and I'll just sort of end by saying this. That's why I'm so happy about this summit and surfacing these issues, and I love the encouragement for everyone to talk about these issues more, including on LinkedIn. I love that, and I'm going to go do that right now, because the reality is all of these things are doable. It is manageable with support and with coverage. The shitty thing is just that if we don't talk about these things, the support and coverage don't exist, and everyone feels like they have to exist in their little silo doing things by themselves. So kudos to those people who talk about these things, and kudos to the organizers of this summit. That's all for me. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much for sharing that perspective. And it's so great to hear someone like you, partner at your firm, someone who's, I think, pretty influential these days in the space, speaking honestly and openly about it. And it's great to hear, that message again, that like it is doable, like not being a parent and having it all figured out, but it is doable for firms to take steps in the right direction. But if we're not talking about it, no one, it's unlikely to happen. So thanks so much for joining us, taking time out of everyone's busy day here. But as parents and lawyers, we all have busy days. So thanks again for that. And
thanks very
up next, we've got Selena Kim, who is another, like Farron, another one of our Build Your Book alumni. She's a partner at Gowling, one of the biggest firms in the world. She's in Toronto. She practices IP litigation and patent prosecution. She's practiced for 20 years in big law and has a keen interest in promoting diversity and sharing career tips for young professionals. If you follow her on LinkedIn or other places, you may have seen her or her newsletter posting a lot of honest and authentic stories about her reality as a mom, whether it's been breastfeeding, other things like that. And today, I'm turning it over to you, Selena, to talk about why aren't moms as successful as dads in big law. I think we've got some hints, but over to you. So excited to hear your
Thanks so much, Aaron. So I'll get right into it. So in my 20 years in big law, I've observed that dads are undeniably more successful than moms. And if you look at the top 10 partners on the pay grid at any large firm, you will see that the vast majority are men, mostly dads. Now, when I point this out, the response I get is, well, this is a relic of less enlightened times. If the women keep at it, we'll get there too. However, if you consider that about half of associate hires have been women since the late 90s, it's now 2022, and it only takes about 10 years to become a partner. You'll see that we are years beyond where we could blame such a difference on the pipeline or outdated practices. And if it's a meritocracy and there are mostly men at the top, then are we saying that men are just naturally better lawyers, better at relationships, better at serving clients than women? I don't think anyone would seriously think that's true. The inequality of outcomes is connected to inequality of opportunity, biases, and marginalization after maternity leaves. For instance, the research shows that after having one child, 63% of women lawyers feel they are perceived by their firms as less committed to their careers versus only 2% of men feeling that way. Now, I have seen men's careers benefit from a fatherhood boost when they become dads, as they are then perceived as more reliable, dependable, motivated family men. Not so much for women. We've all heard the stories. Speaking personally, I had 2 kids, 2 years apart. I had seen so many women's careers tank after they had kids, like Farron mentioned earlier today. And I just wanted to make sure that that didn't happen to me. So I put a ton of support in place. My parents lived across the street from me and they could help. My husband quit his job, became the primary caregiver. I went back to work after 4-month leaves, both times. I didn't disappear. I kept in touch with clients and answered emails every day of my mat leaves. Despite having so much in place and trying so hard to minimize the hit to my career, I still had a very demoralizing period of about 5 years in which I thought I should just give up. I stuck it out, but it was a really tough time. And I've heard similar stories from every other mom I've spoken to on this. Now, big firms will often try to be encouraging by showcasing their top women partners to explain how they made it. But in many cases, the younger moms hearing these stories end up appalled. She replied to emails while in labor. She only took 2 weeks of maternity leave. Do I really have to go through what she went through? You can see why women who want reassurance that the current difficulties are worth it don't see it that way and decide to leave. And I'm definitely not saying that things have been great for all men. Many men, have felt that they have less choice than women when it comes to their careers. And there's a definite bias still against men who exit the workforce to take care of their kids. So I think something we can agree on is that this state of affairs is not working for moms, and many dads don't want things to stay this way either. Now, we've been talking about these issues for years. So why is it so hard to change, especially in big law? So fundamentally, it's because cultural change is required. And big law firms have a managing partner who answers to hundreds of equity partners who have a say on policies. And this kind of structure tends to be resistant to change, especially if there is complacency among men who hold most of the power and, let's face it, benefit from the inequality. So firms could do a much better job of accommodating parental leaves. I mean, they have some good models in place for other types of leaves, but it doesn't get applied to new mothers. So if you consider the example of when senior lawyers in a big firm take on a full-time management role, in most firms, when they exit management and return to practice, they'll have a grace period of salary protection, usually a few years in which they can rebuild their practices. Contrast this with a new mother who might, if she's lucky, get like 2 months of a reduced billing target when she returns from maternity leave. So that's one example of what mothers not being set up to succeed. So looking to the future, how can we change things? And I'm actually optimistic. There are a couple of beneficial shifts that have happened during the pandemic, and I'll raise something directed to the men as well. So the pandemic has caused a widespread mental shift in how we define ourselves. We've realized we are all humans with full lives, relationships, and obligations. We're not robots who can bill 2,000 hours a year for 40 years. So as humans, because life happens, we can expect that all of us will need to temporarily exit the practice at some point for parental leave, mental or physical health issues, burnout, bereavement. Your children or your aging parents will need you sooner or later. Taking time to care for people, it's a fundamentally human thing to do. And sometimes that really will be the best use of your time. And we've traditionally prioritized work and tried to fit the rest of life around the margins of work. But we need to prioritize life with work just being a part of life. Second, something many firms have been doing well, actually, since the pandemic is allowing for hybrid work and models where people can go part-time more easily. So part-time used to be considered like non-workable for big firms, both because of overhead and for some reason because of a perceived lack of commitment by part-timers to the practice. But now law firms are recognizing there are benefits to offering more flexibility. So firms should continue along this path so that lawyers can choose work that fits with the rest of their life commitments, whether that includes eventually returning to the office or returning to full-time or not. As for the men, firms should also be strongly encouraging men to take their parental leaves. The more that do so, the more it's destigmatized for women, and especially for men in a leadership role. Take that leave so that the men after you will feel comfortable doing so. Finally, for the women, mid-career, it's a more satisfying time to practice law for most of us. You know what you're doing and you have more of a team who can help you. So if you can survive the parental leaves, toddler years, and get there, I promise that life gets better. To conclude, the pandemic has provided an amazing opportunity to accelerate social change. So if we just wait for equality to naturally shake out, if we're satisfied with the current rate of microscopic or no gains for mothers, it will be 2181 before women achieve parity in law firms. So if we don't reset our thinking and try to make our profession work better for all lawyers, including mothers and all parents, actually, men and women, we will continue to be distinguished by high levels of dysfunction and stress that plague our profession. So I'm not okay with waiting for 2181 or for things continuing as they have. And I hope you feel the same way. Thank you.
Thanks so much for sharing, Selena. When you say 2181, geez, that is far away, and that really just stands out as, we can't keep saying, this reason, that reason. It's like early in the pandemic, and I'm sure Karen, who's just joined our green room here, probably heard, all these firms, like it's not our firm's culture, it's just and then eventually you're like, oh crap, maybe there are some personal things here going on. We can't keep blaming all these external factors without recognizing the realities on the ground. And there have been more women joining the profession. That's true. But like you said, this is not a brand new phenomenon. And we all know, and there's plenty of stuff, including the ABA study, women are leaving the profession at much faster rates. And that's not good for a million different reasons. So Selena, thank you as always for sharing, for being authentic, for being open, and for being part of this. I'm so glad you joined us today.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we've got Scott Oliver here. So let me add Scott in. Scott is a partner at Lewis Capps, where he focuses on representing banks and non-bank lenders and businesses close to commercial transactions throughout the U.S. He's a frequent speaker on business development, personal branding, and supporting the human side of practice. And I said to Scott, hey, I know you normally talk about BD, but you're also a parent and you're so open about these things. So why don't we have you here? And so today, Scott is chatting about raising the bar and kids standing out while also being there. So Scott, take it away from him.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Aaron, and thank you for everybody who's putting on this summit. I've already listened to several, and it's such great and relevant content for young lawyers and experienced attorneys alike. So my talk obviously hits very close to home. I have a little girl at home. She's almost 4 at this point, which is a little crazy to say, but it all stems from something that I've heard so many times before, whether before becoming a parent or even now. And it's that in this profession, you're going to have to make sacrifices. So the statement in and of itself isn't wrong. The practice of law, it's not easy. You're going to be balancing a lot of plates. And honestly, sometimes those plates are spinning and sometimes those plates are catching on fire. But, it's fine. It's fine. It might be the competitor in me, bring it on. I can handle it. I've heard all of those things. Billable hour requirement. Done. Bill a book of business. All right, that's fine. Early hours or late nights, sure, that's part of the sacrifice, but it really wasn't until I became a father that the statement really hit home. And the interesting part of it is that it wasn't the statement itself. It wasn't in this profession, you'll have to make sacrifices. It was usually what came after that statement. So you'll have to make sacrifices. You might miss that dance recital. You might miss that soccer game. They might wonder, where you are or what you're doing. But don't worry, young attorney, young dad. They're going to understand. That's just the way that the world works if you want to succeed in this profession. And that, I think, was the part that really got to me. That's just the way the world works. That's just the way the profession works if you want to succeed in this profession. And those words to me, they cut like a knife because at the time and even still today, I ask myself, is it true? Am I unable to become a successful lawyer to do the things that I want to do with my career while also being a present parent? And that's the key there, is the present parent. It's easy, easy is not the right word. You can be a parent, but to be present, especially in a demanding career, is difficult for everybody. And these types of statements, they're untrue. And not only are they untrue, they're honestly completely toxic. These are the type of statements that you hear time and time again that alienate men and women alike from wanting to join practice private law. It perpetuates this idea of it's all or nothing perception of practice, that we think lawyers have to be distant parents who only care about things like money and status and all of those stereotypes that you hear or you see about in television or elsewhere. And honestly, that's the whole purpose of this talk, is just to state that we do and we can raise the bar while we're raising kids. I'm not a single parent, and as you can tell, I'm not a mother. There are plenty of related topics that personally I'm just not qualified to speak on. And fortunately, you have plenty of speakers who are speaking on those topics. But what I am is I'm a dad, right? And I'm a dad who works in private law in a demanding practice area where whether or not it's legitimate, time is always seen as being of the essence, right? It's always be here now, respond quick, be there for the client at essentially all hours of the day and all hours of the night. But I'm also a dad who vows to make it home before dinner, which if you guys have a toddler, and I'm thinking some people in the audience probably do, this time of year, dinner starts at around 5 o'clock or 5:30. At least it does in my house. And add a 30-minute commute or so to that, if there's no traffic, that's a pretty tight schedule to be able to work around. So I'm also a dad who's going to be at the dance recitals, the soccer games, and the life events. And am I going to have to sacrifice? Yes, of course, we will have to make sacrifices. But one thing I don't sacrifice, and I encourage you not to either, is your family. So that comes to a piece of advice that I was given several years ago before I became a father, and that was to have non-negotiables. So one thing that I'm never going to negotiate, and what I've always told myself, is that I'm not going to negotiate time with my family, specifically time with my daughter. And I'm not saying that I would leave a client in the dust or walk out the door at 4:30 when something's on fire. That would be absolutely insane. But I am saying that I have clear expectations and I have systems in place so that, there's never going to be a point in her life where she says, "Where was Dad? Where was he at?" "Oh, he was at work. He missed that recital. It was work. It was more important." Once those non-negotiables are set, scheduling time tends to become a little bit easier. It's never going to be easy, but easier is really the key there. This is where I usually will get, if I'm talking to somebody, "Oh, wait, you schedule family time? That's you're kind of weird, right?" And my answer to that's yes, I do. Like, I'm not sending my wife a calendar invite and showing up in a suit and tie or anything formal like that, but I am intentionally scheduling my time. And if time is tight, I'm going to create time and build the rest of my time around that block that I've put out. In fact, the last couple of speakers, including Selena, talked about this too. It's getting what's most important first, your family, and then building out from that, rather than having your job and trying to fit your family into that little piece. It's prioritizing there, right? And to do that, I have no problem waking up early personally. I eat lunch at the 5-star restaurant known as my desk just about every day of the week. And I'm usually saying no to after work events, whether that's drinks, hanging out, going to restaurants and things like that, because I have these specific priorities in mind. So those are the sacrifices that I'm making. And I'm not having an issue making those sacrifices. So that initial statement is right. Another tactic that I learned, it's a bit cheesy, but it's from the same person who talked about the non-negotiables, is thinking of yourself as a knight covered in armor. Right. And I know I said cheesy, but that's actually kind of cool if you think about it. But now that you have your visual in your head there, let's dig into it a little bit. That friend of mine mentioned that I mentioned before about the non-negotiables would compare it to coming home and taking off that armor. So in short, it was his way of saying when you leave work, you're leaving work at work. By the time you walk through that door and you greet your family or whoever it is, you should be yourself. Right? Armor down. That's not saying that you're becoming a different person. This is the Authentic Lawyer Summit. So you're not being somebody who you're not. It just means that you're not going to bring work home or the negativity that comes with any of the issues that arise during the day. You're showing up as a dad, a mom, a husband, a wife, a friend, whoever it is, not the battle-ready attorney who's ready to shoot off a spicy email at all hours of the night. Okay. And, this is easier said than done. And if we're being honest, while I'm talking to you, I'm also talking to myself. In fact, I even thought about that when Aaron first asked me to speak here. I said, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to talk about? I'm no expert here. I'm not perfect. None of us are, but hopefully what I'm sharing is at least resonating with some of you. But just to kind of add to that imperfection, I suppose, is a few weeks ago, several weeks ago at this point, it was before I was asked to speak. I was eating dinner with my daughter, crisscross applesauce, the whole 9 yards, watching, I think it was Gabby's Playhouse. It's on Netflix. That's not a plug. But we were sitting there and she's beside me and we're eating dinner. An email came in, buzz, buzz. I hear it on my phone. And what do you do when you feel your phone vibrate? Of course, you take a look at it. I opened it. It wasn't important. It wasn't anything that needed to be responded to. But what did I do? What did I do? I looked at it and I started typing. And my daughter was saying something and she was just so excited to tell me. And honestly, I don't know what it was she was saying because I wasn't paying attention. And that's the point. I looked over and I kind of heard her saw her out of the corner of my eye and heard what she was saying. But then I looked back down and I looked at my phone and I finished up a response. It was probably something absolutely ridiculous, like, thanks. Thank you for sending. Oh, well, I'll get to it, or something like that. Not necessary. But I looked back over after I finished that response. And by the time I looked back, she looked at me real quick, but I saw the excitement, it faded from her eyes. She wasn't even saying what she wanted to tell me. Whether or not it was truly important, it was important to her. But at that point, it wasn't there anymore. The excitement was gone. So after that, I'm not sure if she even noticed it. I hope that she didn't, and I hope to never do it again. But at that point, she started to inch herself closer to me and she sat down on my lap. And you know how kids do, they start stretching and doing all that. It's late, 5 o'clock, right? Stretching. And she pushes the phone out of my hand. And you could tell it was intentional. And at almost 4 years old, you think that they don't notice, but she noticed and I noticed, and I don't know what she was excited about. And, I have to live with that. And it kind of chokes you up just even talking about it. At a talk like this, right? So we're working in a profession where we're always learning, myself included, certainly, and I'm sure all of you as well. But as parents, we're also lifetime learners. And what works for me, it might not work for you. The non-negotiables, I don't know everybody's situation. The armor coming down, I don't know your schedule. So I don't know everything. But what I can tell you, and this is with certainty, is that we need to raise the bar. And we talk about this in several talks today, tomorrow, yesterday, et cetera. And I would say we have to raise the bar. It's on us to do that. We have to raise the standard for what is, quote unquote, necessary to succeed in this profession. Because, again, I don't claim to know everything, but I know that what's necessary is not sacrificing our family. You can raise the bar without sacrificing the most important thing in your life. We can do that. We can raise the bar while also being present for our family, for our kids, and for everybody else. So I hope that you agree with that as well, and that you take that away and hopefully become present in all of your lives.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, Scott. Love that story at the end. And just a reminder, as Selena was sort of alluding to, I think we've remembered over the pandemic that we're all sort of human. I think as lawyers or attorneys, there's been this, impression we've tried to cultivate over the years, like we're robots, we're perfect, we're, a lot of firms, I think, try to create that impression. And we've remembered that we're human. And by sharing these kind of stories about reality, I think it reminds everyone, like, we're all bringing so much, to the table and dealing with so many things. And, life as a parent, like you said, 5 p.m., you're home, you're singing songs. I've not had to be exposed to all the terrible children's TV yet. That's coming for me in the next year or two. But, that's reality, right? The stuff I'm doing is not the stuff at all that looks like being a lawyer. It's a very different thing. But thanks again, Scott, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Next up is Matt Schwartz, and he's joining us from his car because that's what happens when you drop off your kids in the morning and live in a city with really bad traffic. So we're going to hope this one works. Matt leads DLA Piper's venture and growth lending practice, sometimes even from his car. He's the chair of DLA Piper's West Coast Finance Practice Group, involved in a number of amazing charities, including ones that provide opportunities for people with developmental disabilities, children from military families, organ donation, and so much more. He is a very proud law dad, and we are thrilled he is here with us today. Matt, you're talking about work-life integration for parents with young kids, and the fact you're doing this from the car or maybe the van, probably no better way to do it. So floor is over to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, look, I've had a crazy morning, and I think it's a perfect way to do this talk. I'm sitting here in my Suburban, a bunch of baseball gear in the back, a bunch of Cheetos in the back seat. Yeah, this is the life of a law dad. So I'll tell you what happened this morning. I was going to tell you a typical day in the life, and kind of explain what I mean about work-life integration versus the phrase I don't like, which is work-life balance. This morning I had to drive from San Diego up to LA. It should be about a 2.5 hour ride. It took me about 3.5 hours to get to where I am now, pulled over on the side of the road, partially because my 4-year-old was sick, and my 9-year-old needed help getting his football gear ready before I left the house. And this is how most mornings start for me. Trying to field emails, trying to deal with the kids, trying to get them packed and ready to go out the door. And the reality is there's no way to separate the work part and the kids part. The only way that I found to make it really work is to do what I call integrating them. And that's where you just layer your work right into your family stuff. So let me set you through a typical day and kind of talk to you about how I view it. There are 168 hours in the week. For working parents, there are very few hours left after you take into account the 10 hours a day that you sleep and shower and take care of your basic personal needs, the 60 or so hours that you probably give to your job. If you're like the average lawyer, I think the average lawyer really gives 60 hours a week. If you're giving a little bit less, good on you. That leaves you about 40 hours left a week to be with your family and do all of your own personal self-care that needs to be done. And for working parents, the struggle is real to figure out how to allocate that time. I'm here to tell you, though, that it can be done. So our typical day starts in our house around 6 o'clock. My kids get up. I'm checking emails. We're packing lunches. We're doing water bottles. We're packing football gear. Most days we're out the door at 7:35. I drop my kids at school at 8 o'clock, and that's when the calls begin. Generally between 8 and 9:30, I schedule a bunch of different 30-minute calls, whether it's people on my team who want to catch up, client calls, whatever it is. That's the most productive time of the day. At 9:30 every day during the week, I go and work out with a personal trainer for a half hour. It's absolutely key for working parents that you get your workouts in during the school day when your kids are at school, because if you think you're doing it in the morning or at night or on the weekend, it's just not going to happen. Critically important to get that self-care in during the workday. I know that sounds crazy, but that's really the only time there is to do it. I get back 10 o'clock or so and I'm cranking through meetings. Perhaps I have a lunch. I might have a group lunch. I might have a client lunch. Cranking through work calls. Most days at around either 3 or 3:30, I go to pick my older son up at school and take him to one of his many activities. Now, there are two forks in the road on those days. On the days when it's baseball and I'm the coach, I'm going to be out of pocket from like 3 to 6, maybe even 3 to 6:30, depending on what our day looks like. And then we get home and I dial back into work. On other days, like when I'm taking him to soccer or football or one of the sports I don't coach, I generally tend to set meetings with either clients, catch-up calls, prospects during the time that he's at his practice. And I sit there in my car, just like I am now, watching him practice, but taking a work call. Either way, we get home, shower, bedtime, dinner, and then it's back to the phone or the computer to dial back in and crank out another hour or 2 or 3 of work. Now, that may sound crazy to some people, but in my mind, that is the kind of integration it takes to be able to do your job well, to be a good parent, to have some time for self-care. There just is no way around it. Now, I want to encourage you to pick those times that work for you and your family, right? That is the schedule that works for me and my kids. I have a member on my team who recently joined from another firm who kind of sheepishly said to me in the third week he was here, well, hey, I'm on the central time zone and it'd be really nice if between 6 and 8 central, I could just be with the family and then kind of dial back in afterwards. And I said, absolutely, put it on your calendar, right? Call it whatever you want, family time, out of office time. It makes no difference, but you have to calendar that time. And you and we and everybody kind of have to message to the world around us that this is what it takes for parents to have a successful career in law. I have literally never had a client fire me because I was either picking my kid up, dropping my kid off at school, going to a parent teacher conference, coaching them. People realize these days that parents need to do these things in order to be successful and happy people. And you just need to advocate for yourself and articulate why it's a career necessity for you to do the things for your kids and your family the way you need to. And frankly, for yourself, I think a big part of parenting that gets overlooked is the self-care that it takes, whether that's working out, speaking with a therapist, which I do regularly, getting massages, taking walks, walking your dog. It doesn't matter what it is. You have to integrate that into your daily life. You can't wall yourself off from that while you're at work. Last point, many people, you may have seen my sort of speaker bio is a picture of me and my son in our baseball gear. And I believe I'm the only lawyer, whose LinkedIn picture does not look what I'd call quote unquote professional. I'm doing that for each and every one of you. I think that when we show the world our authentic selves, even if it's not a suit and tie, that is meaningful. If it takes me doing that to advocate for parents, to take time off to coach their kids, to go pick them up, to go to their whatever lessons, so be it. I have to say I've gotten way more positive feedback than negative, and I continue to plan to put the needs, desires of parenting on the forefront, as we sort of push forward into the next generation of lawyers here. Thank you. I appreciate you having me. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks so much for joining us, Matt, despite the chaos of your day. And if anyone has any questions or comments for Matt, toss them in the chat. Definitely seeing things about calendaring family time. I certainly do the same. Obviously that changes with a newborn, but for me, it's, between 5 and 7:30, 7:45. I'm not available. If you need me, you can call me because I can multitask. I can hold a kid and talk, but I'm not at a computer at that time. And like you said, people know that. They understand that. They respect that. I do think there are probably some gender or sex differences going on here that we are probably both benefiting from. Maybe not. I hope not. But my gut is maybe there are. But it's amazing that you are not just comfortable, but really out there speaking out about this because it's so important. And again, we don't talk about this enough. And like you said, you're probably the only person at your stage who's out there with that profile photo of you and your son, the baseball gear, because that's not what lawyers do. That's not a professional image, yet it's a human image. And as we all know on the business development side, being a human, it turns out, is the secret to that and being authentic. And guess what? I'm sure lots of your clients have kids and they probably
do.
respect the fact,
As do the folks that work for me, right? The people on our team look at me as an example of living the life that maybe they could live with their kids. And that's what I want to be, is I want people to go, hey, look, he's making it work. That means I can too.
Amazing. Matt, thanks so much for joining us. Best of
Thank
luck
you for
with the
having me.
traffic. And
Okay,
we'll
appreciate
chat
it.
soon. Before we jump into our last big speaker here, I just want to throw a link into the chat, which is a form for CPD or CLE. I know there's a couple people who are eligible for this. So feel free to fill that out. You can just use the code parenting just in that form. And that way, again, we can track attendance in case there's ever an issue in the future where someone disputes whether or not you are here. So feel free to fill that out now or later today. One comment in the chat: how do junior attorneys navigate this? And I'm curious, maybe Karen, if you'll touch on that in your talk. If not, we can get to that after. But there is definitely, a difference between, I think, at different stages, what you're able to do. That balance, or I shouldn't say balance, integration, Matt has created, probably not as easy, definitely not as easy to create as a first year or second year associate. But maybe it also depends on the environment. But we'll get there. Karen, I want to introduce you because I'm so excited to hear you talk for a million different reasons. For those of you who don't know Karen, she's the managing director at Whistler Partners, which is one of the country's, or I should say the US's, premier leading legal recruiting shops. She's a former litigator and law firm partner, recently left Big Law to do this current job. She works with the top talent in the legal industry who are looking to transition from the current job. She's married to, I'm going to be my words, not her words, to a human meme, University of Texas law professor Steve Vladeck. We can say things about him. He's not here, right? And together they have two wonderful children, Madeline, who's in first grade, and Sydney, who's in pre-K. She also hosts a podcast with her husband, all about parenting and being lawyers. And today, Karen, so excited to hear your chat, or your talk rather, about surviving and maybe even thriving during the first 5 years of parenthood. So Karen, over to you, and floor is.
Yeah, Erin, thanks so much. Y'all, it's great to be here. My talk today focuses a little bit more on the parenting part of things. I loved hearing Matt's perspective about being a parent and working. So I am obviously a mom. I'm a mom of two young girls, Madeline, who's 6.5, and Sydney, who is 4. And I wanted, when Erin reached out to talk to me about this, the first thing that came to my mind is, oh my God, those first 5 years as a lawyer and as a parent are so hard. And I really wanted to talk about surviving and maybe thriving, question mark, during those first 5 years. And I remember so clearly when my oldest was born, feeling like I had been completely abandoned once the baby was actually here. So, for those of you on this call who have been pregnant or are currently pregnant, you get so much attention during pregnancy from your OB who you see all the time, from your relatives, from the world at large. Everybody is commenting on your pregnancy, right? But once the baby's born and out, you're like quite literally left to fend for yourself. And I remember when they discharged us out of GW Hospital, where we had Maddie, our oldest daughter, in DC, I looked at my husband, Steve, and I was like, wait a second. They just let us leave with her? Where's the nurse? Who comes with us? And so this talk is meant to highlight some of the things that have worked for me, for my husband, and for friends of ours that we talked to and that I polled as I was prepping for this talk over the first few years of our lives as parents and as professionals. So because I am a lawyer by training, I have to give a disclaimer that no one knows your kids and your circumstances better than you. Not everything in this talk will work for you, and some of them may be impossible given your specific circumstances. But, all of these things are just suggestions that I hope you can take away at least one or two niblets of things that will work for you and for your family wherever you are on your parenting journey. So with that being said, I made a top 10 list, David Letterman style, of the things that I now have with the value of a little bit of hindsight, as my kids are a little bit older, that I really wish someone had sort of neatly packaged up and told me when my kids were very young. So let's get going. And please, the chat is open. If you have things that you want to throw out there for the community, please go ahead, and I'll try to answer them as I go along as well. So number 10, if you're going through hell, keep on going. You have heard the saying with newborns that as soon as you get used to a stage, it changes. And I have found this to be pretty much consistently true over the last 7 years. So I think, potty training, the terrible threes, which, by the way, are terrible threes, not terrible twos. 3 is so much worse than 2. Sleep regressions, all of that. It ends, right? Things all end. And I promise you that no matter how hard it is for you in this exact moment, it's all going to one day be a distant memory. And so if you're in a hard moment, or if you're in a great moment with parenting, it really is all temporary. And, we all hear like, you can have it all, you just can't have it all at once. It's all the same concept, right? You might have something really great going on in one area of your life and really terrible in another area of your life. Try to keep going with that one area that is terrible. And at least in my experience, it usually does eventually turn around when it comes to kids. And if it doesn't, after, an extended period of time, like 4 to 6 months, that's when you have to step back and reassess, like, what am I doing and how can I change that? And that takes us to number 9, which is building your village of people outside of other caretakers, right? So this one is and continues to be a really hard one for me because our closest family is 2,500 miles away. We are essentially on our own in Texas. We have no grandparents. We have no relatives here. And I remember when we moved from DC to Austin in 2016, as Aaron said, my husband is a law professor here in Austin, and I had a 6-month-old, and my first was 6 months old. And I thought, I'll just go to the park and I'll make all these friends with other moms and other people. And what I didn't account for was that I'd be at work all day, right? And that my baby still mostly napped on the weekends, and I didn't know anybody in her daycare class. And I had missed that moment in time, that window of making friends in my 20s that were non-baby related. So look, if you're in that situation, just keep going. I have really found a much more supportive community and village as my kids have gotten older. whether that be through their friends at school or through my own networking efforts that are completely unrelated to kids. And as I got older, I just had a little bit more time to be going to networking events and meeting other people, or playing more tennis, or doing other hobbies where I met people. And the early years in that regard can be really, really hard to build a village. And so if you're struggling with it, first, know it gets easier. And second, you really only have to find like 1 or 2 activities in order to build your village, whether that is joining a parenting group of new parents, finding a hobby that you like, as Matt said, carving out that time for you, going to a gym, finding a community there. And building your village allows you to rely on people that when you are in those really hard moments, you have another ear to listen to. And that has been really valuable for me. Number 8, and this goes with building your village, but is slightly different, which is reliable childcare. Okay. You cannot and you will not survive, no matter how hard you try, as a working parent without reliable childcare. And there is a reason that you hear people refer to stay-at-home parents as having a full-time job, because hear me out. Raising a child during the day is a full-time job, and you cannot have 2 full-time jobs. You absolutely need reliable, good childcare. And I will tell you what we have done, because I think it is super important to share all different perspectives. And know that there is not one perfect way to do this. Okay. It will all depend on where you live. Do you have a partner that you're with as well? Do you have family help? All of that. So for us, we have always utilized what I would consider to be a 2-prong approach. So we have used daycare since our children were very young. My youngest started daycare at 6 months old. My oldest started daycare at 6 months old. My youngest started daycare at 4 months old. And we've always had an afternoon babysitter who has helped us. So that afternoon babysitter has driven our kids. She usually picks them up at school. And now that my oldest is in elementary school, which in case no one has told you, elementary school gets out at like 2:45. So it is super early. It's like in the middle of the day. And so we have used a babysitter. We are lucky to be in a college town. So we've always used sort of college age babysitters. And they have picked up, bring them home. They help around the house during dinner time, during those super tough hours of 4 to 7, where sometimes we're back from work, but oftentimes we're not. My husband's traveling, I'm traveling. So we have just a third adult in the situation. Some people utilize full-time nannies. Some people utilize full-time daycares. Some people utilize family or have a partner who stays home. But whatever you use, really take the time to make the choice for what it's going to be, and realize that there's absolutely no one perfect solution to this. There's pluses and minuses to each, and we're all just really trying to do the best that we can. And go forward with that decision and be confident in it. But no matter what you do, you have to have reliable childcare, or you will not be able to do your job. All right, number 7. And this one I think hits home for us who are perfectionists, type A's, which a lot of us on this call are, I know, is that when it comes to childcare and life more broadly, right, but really with young kids, is comparison is the thief of joy. When your baby is little, everyone asks about sleep because they pretty much have nothing else to talk about, right? I remember feeling like this was like the sleep Olympic competition or something. And I was in my baby music class at the JCC on 16th Street in DC. And everyone was talking about like, whose baby had the longest stretch? When was your baby napping? Were they going down by themselves? Were they nursing to sleep? And it was just like, somehow that was indicative of whether you were a good parent or not. And these babies were so young, right? And, I just remember thinking, oh my God, she's only sleeping 3 hours. This baby's sleeping 5 hours. Something's wrong with her. At the same time, I remember going to a brunch with my friend, Lindsay Harrison, who's a partner at Jenner. She has a daughter who's very close in age to mine. And I think Maddie was like 5 or 6 weeks old. So we're talking about like a really, really little baby. And Lindsay's like, oh, what's going on? What kind of things is she doing? And I was like, well, we have this we called it a play gym, but it was like really a mobile where like things were hanging down. And Lindsay was like, oh yeah, did she lie on her back and like swat at it? And I was like, yeah. And I get home and I swear to God, I laid my 6-week-old down and I was like, swat, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you swatting at the things? And like, of course, in hindsight, that is bananas. But someone else said, oh, my kid's doing that. So I thought, oh, my kid should be doing that too. Do not let other successes or challenges change your perspective about what is not working in your own life. And this is going to be true forever. Just because somebody else's kid is more advanced, less advanced, whatever it is in that moment in time, I promise you that honestly, none of it matters. And I do actually hope that you have a champion baby sleeper and you won that lottery. We did not. We had 2 kids who were just totally mediocre sleepers, and I'm a big proponent of sleep training. So number 6, and this is something that is true very much in the workplace as well as in parenting, but and also becomes even more true as they enter those toddler years, is, you know, you have this like amazing 12-month-old who looks at you with these doe eyes and you think that they can do no wrong in the world. And then the next day you wake up with a 3-year-old who's having this epic meltdown about how you sliced a banana. And honestly, like, pro tip, there's never a right way to slice a banana for a toddler. They will use it against you no matter what in every single circumstance. And honestly, kids have meltdowns. Like, they just do. That's part of life. Things are hard for them, right? They're trying to figure out a world in a way that really doesn't make sense to them. And the one way that I can sort of, there's lots of people who are parenting experts and can tell you how to deal with tantrums, but what has worked for me as sort of a mainstay is to be proactive instead of reactive. And what I mean by that is that you know your kid first and foremost above everybody else, their pediatrician, other parenting experts, sleep coaches, whatever, right? And you have to, as the parent, be proactive to set your kid up for success. So what do I mean by that? Here's an example. If everybody in their class, you know, you have a 4-year-old preschool class, pre-K, everybody's signing up for soccer and the games are at noon. Well, your kid still naps and you know that your kid is going to be a disaster at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. A reactive parent is going to take that kid to soccer practice anyway because the parent wants to see other parents or they think it's good for the kid or whatever. And then all of a sudden you're saddled with this terrible meltdown. It ruins the day. You're cursing soccer forever. You're wondering, why am I such a bad parent? Why is my kid so bad? Everybody else is fine here. That's a reactive parent, right? A proactive parent is setting their kids up for success by saying to the kid, let's try soccer next year. You know, that's your nap time. Let's stick to that. That parent knows in advance what things are going to help their kid be set up for success, and they choose that route as much as they can. Now, obviously, this doesn't always work, right? We can't always set our kids up for success. That's life. Your kid's still going to have a meltdown about the banana from time to time. But asking the kid in advance, hey, do you want to slice this with me or do you want to slice it yourself? That's being the proactive parent, right? And you can oftentimes set yourself up for success and move the needle just by thinking, all right, what do I need to do to set my kid up for success in this? And that's being the proactive versus the reactive parent. Okay, number 5, blocking out all the people who will tell you, just wait until ... So some of you may follow me on Twitter and you can do that. I'm at KSVESQ. I often tweet about the shenanigans of my life with kids, and they are oftentimes, you know, totally wild. And it drives me insane sometimes when people say, just wait until ... right? And it's usually like, just wait until this happens or just wait until they're teens or whatever. Every single stage of parenting is hard in a different way. It's not harder or easier. It's just different hard, right? Babies are sleepless, but they don't talk back. Then there's tantrums, then there's potty training, there's learning new words, there's learning how to read. It all just keeps changing. So enjoy the age that your kid is at right now, or if you are getting ready to have kids, enjoy that period of time in your life. And don't pre-stress about all the things that are going to come down the pipe, okay? 100% block out the people that feel the need to make you feel like there's misery coming down the pipeline. In my experience, it's just not true. You know, when I was pregnant, I would like be like, I'm so tired, I'm so miserable. And they're like, oh, just wait till the baby comes. Honestly, the baby coming was actually better than being pregnant. I hated being pregnant. So like, it's not always true that the next stage is like so terrible. It's just different, right? So block out the just wait untils. All right, number 4. And this is actually really important and sort of is a little counterintuitive to the fact that I'm giving you 10 tips, but like, always remember that we really are just parenting at the margins, right? Your kid is your kid. how they came out. So much of their personality in life is predetermined by their DNA and their personality types. And so my friend Lisa Rubin put it in a really great way. She said, your children are of you, but they are not you, right? So like your kid, you can try and mold them as much as you can and do all these parenting tricks, but they are just kind of who they are. And remembering that is actually pretty helpful when things are not going your way, that it's really not you. It's not you being a bad parent, but sometimes kids are just how they are. And some kids are more difficult than others. All right, number 3, and I think that this goes to Matt's talk, is that you'll really never regret making a decision that's right for your family in that moment. And you need to know that careers are long, right? So this to me is actually really a North Star of mine. I think as we become parents, and especially parents that are working professionals, there is so much noise out there about what we should be doing, especially women, right? We should stay home. We should go back to work. We should work part-time. We should go for partner. Don't back out of the field. We should go in-house because it's easier. We should never leave our kid before a year. You absolutely need to be back at work for 12 weeks, right? I heard every iteration of that, right? So there is something that has just always rung true for my husband and for me, is that we have made the choice that is best for our family in any given moment in time. Okay. So again, all of our lives right now are just a snapshot of moments that where our kid is at, and nothing in your career or life is irreversible. 10 years ago, I was a mid-level associate at a big law K Street law firm gunning for partner. Now I'm a legal recruiter in Austin, Texas. If you had asked 28-year-old me, 28-year-old Karen, if this is where I would be 10 years from now, she would have been like, ew, no, I hate recruiters, right? But careers are long. There's twists, there's turns that happen along the way, and it's essentially impossible to predict the future. So this is me telling you that you should make whatever decision you need to make for your family right now, and that you will never regret making a decision that works for you in this moment. And number 2 really dovetails with that, which is that you have to find a job that aligns with your personal family values, right? And no matter how much you plan, no matter how reliable you think your childcare is, no matter how many I's you've dotted and T's you've crossed, emergencies come up, right? And if you're in a 2-parent relationship, you cannot both be in completely inflexible jobs. Like, it's just a recipe for disaster. If you're a single parent, you already know this, right? You have to have either a job with flexibility or a joint caregiver who has some flexibility, and or both, right? And kids get sick. Daycare calls you. My kid had a fever for 7 days last week. She was home the whole week, right? And last year for COVID closures, it felt endless, right? It wasn't pretty, but my husband and I made it work. And that's because we have prioritized having flexible jobs, and that aligns with our need for flexibility because we don't have anybody else, right? We have to rely on just the 2 of us. Not everyone needs that kind of flexibility in their own situation, but if you do, you need to be honest with yourself that you have to find a job that aligns with that, or you're never going to feel successful at parenting and at work, right? You got to search for that job. And number 1 is allowing your perspective on parenting to change over time. So there is this expression that the most perfect parent is the one who doesn't have kids yet. And we all have conceptions about what we are going to be like as parents. So I remember having one child, she was 9 months old. I went out with a dad friend of mine who had 3 older girls. They were like, 7, 8, and 9 at the time. And they were eating grilled cheese and French fries. And I had this like perfectly curated veggie meal and pouch for my 9-month-old. And I remember thinking, oh, when my kids are that age, they'll definitely always have fruits and vegetables. My kids last week said, Mom, this grilled cheese isn't grilled enough. I don't like this cheese in the middle. My kids, I had no idea what was coming down the pipe. And of course, I had to let my perspective change as I got older. I got my comeuppance when I was judging people whose kids were older than me. And you just never know what it's going to be like in that moment. So screen time, breastfeeding, formula, all those things that you feel like so dogmatic about in the moment, it's okay to change your mind and change your perspective on things, right? Again, we're all just doing the best that we can at any given snapshot moment in time. Don't be so rigid in what you think a good parent does that you don't react to what's going on in your life in that exact moment. So with all that being said, I know I only have 20 minutes, but I am happy to continue this conversation offline with people. I will hold office hours every week, even if you're not in the market to change jobs. You can find me on Twitter at KSVSQ. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can email me at KarenVladek@WhistlerPartners.com. And I just want to let you know, wherever you are in your parenting journey, you really are doing a great job. Just by being here and trying to find your true authentic self, you are being a great parent to your kids. So thank you, Erin, for inviting me to speak.
Thank you so much for that talk. That was fantastic. And just you'll see the comments again after. I don't think you were looking at them as you were talking, which is a smart move on your end, but just resonating so much. And if anyone else was resonating, feel free to chime in the chat. I want to quickly share my screen just to show one of my favorite things that Karen has out there. And it's something actually when Dal and I were doing some courses with people early in the year, I actually showed them, like, let's take a look at Karen's bio, which does not look like a normal bio. I mean that in the best way possible. You know what I'm talking about. This is her professional, quote unquote professional. I think it's extremely professional, but the traditional folks in the legal space don't. Right, here's some photos. We got the, I think, Hook'em Horns, I assume, probably in Texas. It's awesome. Like, it's a little sarcastic. It's human, right? And that is not at all what the average lawyer bio looks like. And Dowell and I did stuff with some of the people in our courses where we just walk them through their own bios and the average lawyer bio, and it's just like, you're a not you, but robots, professional. But you know, you're in the business of trying to get people to choose you, obviously, over another recruiter, and there's so many reasons to do that. But I mean, who would you rather work with? The person who's a human, or the person who's not? I think you also have a great line somewhere in here about like winning all the awards or whatever, which I really like. It's buried. Yeah, there we go. She's won all the awards, won all the awards that lawyers win. You know, because I think we share the similar view on some of these awards in their meeting. But hey, you know, here's your interview motivation anthems, right? You know, like, what is more human than this sort of stuff? So I just thought that's awesome. And if you haven't checked out her podcast, are you still making more episodes, or is that?
No, so we haven't done a podcast in a while, but we do have 2 years worth of materials where we talk to all different kinds of lawyers in different phases of their lives. And so it's honestly kind of evergreen content. It's still up. You can listen to it. I'd love to engage with anybody who wants to talk about it. And who knows, we may come back. Things are a little busy. My husband has a book coming out, you know, and we haven't picked it back up, but we might fire up those podcast microphones.
Dal and I know the drill on starting podcasts and then you know, abandoning them, not because just because there's so many other things and so much time, but highly encourage people to check it out. All interviews with Karen and her husband, with practicing people in the legal profession, and I love the name because it's a brilliant sort of play on words here. But Karen, thank you so much for joining us. And again, you'll see in the comments, people were absolutely loving it.
Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate it. Thanks, y'all.
Perfect. And speaking of people in Texas who are going to say y'all now, Dal, over to you to take it away from here.
I'm on mute this whole time. All right, here we go. I'm one of these other outsiders who moved to Texas. You know, just one of those things, as Karen was speaking, could not have expected in a million years to be living in Texas, to be in the legal field at all. I spent almost a decade working in tech. I was in Canada, that's where I grew up. Lived in California for a couple of years working in tech, and the call came from Aaron a couple of years back at the start of the pandemic and needed some help. And, you know, here we are a couple of years later working in law. So just really resonated with all the conversations that have been happening today over the last 2 days as well. And, you know, something that keeps coming up again and again is this idea that it's not just an individual thing. There's a lot of incredible tips, ideas, mindset changes we talked about during the session. There's a systemic issue also at play here. How do we change things systematically? How do we change things at the leadership level, at law firms, at organizations as a whole? And I think that's always been our intent in building this Authentic Lawyer Summit. It's not just to have conversations one-on-one. I know at the beginning of this talk or beginning of this session, we asked a lot of you to make those LinkedIn posts and actually share your insights with other people. But this time we want you to, you know, do something a little bit different. This time our challenge is a lot more systemic. It's a challenge we want to take to the leaders of organizations and put them to task and say, hey, here's what the actual reality is like. Because quite often organizations will say one thing and then the actual ground reality is quite different. And we want to highlight that contrast, and we want to hear from you. What do you want your organization to admit that this is how it actually is? And to make that happen, we've created a short little form. We'd love for you to fill it out. If you've attended this session in the past, you kind of know what it is. I'm putting the link in the chat, and I'll put it here on the screen as well. If you go on the site, authenticlawyersummit.com/parenting, you'll see a link called the challenge. And the challenge just literally just asks you the same questions that I mentioned right now. What does your firm, your organization actually say about parenting, your role as a parent, and your work as a legal professional? And what's the actual reality that you see? And what do you want the firm, the organization, to actually admit, right? Because the first part of solving anything is to admit that there's an issue. And by the way, this form is completely anonymous. No one can see it. No one can, we're not going to be able to find out what your identity is. But we want to collect this information, and we want you to name your organization. Because if you can name it, our hope is eventually to go to the leaders of these big organizations and tell them that, hey, here's the issue. Here's what your people actually say, despite whatever you're saying publicly to them. And sort of that's our hope. That's our wish, our vision. And Aaron, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. I'm guessing that's a no.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And for those of you who joined us yesterday, you would have heard something I said, which is it's great to have all these talks from amazing people, Karen and Farron and Selena and Scott and Matt and everyone else. I know I missed one name in there.
Paul Eric.
Exactly. But that's great. And it's great to leave inspired and validated and all those things. But if we end there, what have we done? We've done a little bit, which is great, but we haven't addressed the systemic issues. We basically just said, great, it's up to you to navigate this crazy world we live in and this profession that has a lot of problems. So we really want to be doing our part after the summit in the coming months to try to address some of these changes. And to do that, we need to better understand your perspective. So go ahead, head to that link, authenticlawyersummit.com/parenting. You'll see it in there, the challenge. Click on it and just fill it out. And as Dowell said, it's completely anonymous. Dowell, back to you. And I know we've got some other stuff coming up, but I think we'll probably give people a minute or two to fill it out, and then we'll explain what comes up next.
Sure. Once you finish filling this out, you can then click on the Conversations That Matter link. It's a platform we're going to go off to, and we can have a few more conversations. Right now, you've been hearing just us talk, speakers talk, that sort of thing. But now it's time for all of us internally listening in to talk as well. And the Conversations That Matter, we'll take you to this platform called Gather Around. We have created and curated a set of questions that are geared towards parenting, towards sort of helping one another with these life changes, maybe highlighting or bringing up some of these questions. And this platform will auto guide you through a set of discussions that help you on that front. Everything is timed, so no one can sort of hog the limelight. There's a lot of one-on-ones, there's group discussions, and everything is geared towards making sure that you're meeting and interacting with interesting people that are at this summit. And the really cool thing is that once the conversation is done, you will get an email summary of the people you met. And if you wish, you can choose to connect with them as well.
And I'm jealous I can't join, but part of working from home is parenting from home, and that means being able to help out my wife and see my kid during the day, which is great. So I can't be there, but I know most of you will be there, and I'm so excited for you. For those of you who joined us yesterday, you got a taste of Gather Around, and it's the kind of thing I wish every networking event was like, or just ways to keep these conversations going. You've heard from some amazing people, but again, there's so much to share, and we can tell from the comments how passionate so many of you are on those topics. So Dowell will post a link to that shortly, and Dowell will see most of you there. I've got a baby to hold and feed and do things along those lines. And for those of you who are joining us this afternoon, can't wait, of course, to see you there as well. But Dowell, over to you.
That's about it. We have 2 more sessions coming up. In an hour, we're going to be doing the setting yourself apart with business development session. Same kind of thing. Great speaker set. Just incredible speakers we've got lined up. And then tomorrow in the morning at the same time, we've got understanding different perspectives. So if you are free, please join up. We're going to be posting recordings of it as well. But if you can, as I'm sure you're starting to see, the live comments, the interaction is what really makes the event pop. So looking forward to that. And for everyone else, we will see you in the Conversations That Matter. Finish up that form. See you in a couple of minutes. Thanks.
Thanks so much, everybody.